Hello and welcome, my name is Trismegistus, and today we're going to be reading through and searching the latest Factorio Friday Facts. Friday Facts 426, Resource Search and Assembler GUI Improvements. Posted by Clonan. Hello, as the 2.0 release approaches, we have been spending time polishing and resolving things which we found during our playtesting. It's a relatively small one this week, and that gives me a little bit of an opportunity to explain that for the next 2 weeks I will not be doing the Friday Facts on the usual day. The reason for this is I'm going away on holiday, so I won't be around to do them. But don't worry, I'll do some catch-up videos when I get back. Resource Search. It's the same old story, a feature that we've wanted for a long time, but that was never high enough on the priority list. With more types of resources, it became a little bit more important to have a way to find resources on the map view. And with the new chart search from Friday Facts 400, it was finally time to put it into place. So it does go on to explain it, but it's kind of pretty much self-evident in this first picture. This is just a new addition to the GUI. We've got remote view, and it allows you to search. So we've got the search icon over here and the ability to type the name in for the various resources. So all they're really doing here is they're typing iron ore into that search, and it's coming up with the iron ore resource patches that it's got presumably within its entire map view. My assumption is that this is restricted to the particular surface that you're on, so you're not going to find iron ore patches on, say, Volcanus when you're searching on Nauvis, and also that it's what's been revealed on the map. If you ever had a resource patch that is kind of across the boundary of the Fog of War, then you'll know that it won't tell you the entire size of the patch, just what it can see. So presumably these numbers that it's coming up with are kind of what's on the map view that's been revealed. And say if you had one that was across a boundary, it would only show you that revealed part. One of the things that is a little bit interesting is that it appears to be kind of sorting them in the size order, but putting the ones that you've occupied, so the ones that you are actually mining, at the top. So you've got the two here, 6.9 and 3.2 million, which are mapped to these two. So this is the 6.9 and this is the 3.2. And then you've got 7.8, 5.5, and those two are there. And so you see that they're also in size order. So 7.8, 5.5, 1.7, as you go down the list. But the two that are occupied, as I say, which are smaller than that one, are at the top. You'll also notice here, it does explain this, but just to spoil it really, there is a little pin thing. So if you want to have these pinned, particularly I would have thought a use case for that would be patches that are just about to run out and you want to keep an eye on them. And you do just want to check. Others might be that are critical resources that you really need it to be a full belt for what you're doing, and so that you can pin it, and then you can just quickly do that mouse overview to see, well, are all those belts full? All right, so it's mining it, but is it, does it need speed modules? Does it need, some boost to it? But as I say, the entire kind of what this is kind of encapsulated in this picture, but we'll read on. It took some care to make it work in a performance-friendly way. The game doesn't keep track of all the generated ores, as there are just too many of them. So the search needs to check every charted chunk to find them all. We run the search in a separate thread and only populate the final result when it's ready. This way, searching a large map won't introduce any stutter. So that just literally means the game does not keep a database, a registry, a list of all the iron ore patches or the copper ore patches that have been revealed. And so what it's actually having to do is go through the map, the actual sort of display itself in a sense, and say, right, well, what patches have you found and what are the sizes of them? And only once it's completed that search, which is happening basically in a parallel thread, will it sort of populate the results here. So that's quite interesting actually, that it doesn't maintain an active database of what all of the patches are. My assumption is that there's going to be something that is stored that says whether it's being mined, basically, whether there are any miners on a patch, because this occupied, sort of tag here, this occupied notice must be coming from something, and I wouldn't imagine it's actually searching the map to say, right, well, are there miners overlapping this patch? It's probably something that is stored somewhere to say what miners are where. We also added the ability to pin the resource patch, and the count of remaining ore will update as the patch is mined. You can also use this to keep an eye on how things are going and be aware when a patch is running dry. So we just see that demonstrated in the next screen capture. These are the pins. You may remember those from the previous Friday Facts. So this copper ore has been pinned, and presumably that was done via the search, but maybe it wasn't. But anyway, it's been pinned, so it's in this list, and then simply hovering over it shows you how the patch is doing. So as I say, a good use case is, for example, these copper ores, you'd need them to be full belts or as close as you can get. And as you can see, this is not a full belt, so you might think, right, I need to remember to come back here and put more miners on this or assign some jobs to the bots in order to get this fully mined out. The fact that it also tracks the resource is going to be really nice as well, because that's going to be a very, very nice indicator of which patches are about to drop off, or if you're trying to mine out a patch, and you want to put more miners on it, you want to increase the number of speed modules, you want to stick beacons on it, you want to get rid of a patch, then having a little thing that's counting down as it goes, and then once it's gone, you can, rip it up and do that all via the pinning on the maps is going to be quite a nice little quality of life feature. The search also helps solve another issue, which is that depending on the combination of resources and terrain colour, the resources can be difficult to spot. For example, some of us had problem finding coal on the darker volcanoes biomes. The resource search helps to solve this as the highlight is very prominent. So we got my favourite juxtaposition slidey diagrams. Basically, so the left here, it doesn't actually give a description, but it's pretty obvious. The left here is like the unsearched version. So this is just looking at the map view on volcanoes, and you can kind of see, depending on the contrast of your screen or what have you, that there are coal patches here. But I could fully understand that, if your brightness is a bit lower, you're not looking properly, you're not, it's quite zoomed in, this picture as well, you could be quite high level and so you wouldn't see them. And particularly since they do sit underneath cliffs, so there's no terrain features to necessarily clue you in. A black coal patch on a very, very dark grey background is just difficult to see. So then with the search applied, we've now got really, really prominent descriptions, of what's there basically. So it's coal and it's got 1.6 million and this is the edge of the patch. And yeah, they're all really, really clear. The darkening here I'm not sure about. I think that might be based on this. It's a darkening that the search does. So it's effectively sort of saying, now I'm doing a search and it sort of applies a sort of greyish filter over the top and then that highlights these even more. They're literally much more sort of dark against light, light against dark rather. So I think that darkening is what's applied by the search, and presumably when you exit the search it gets rid of that darkening. The only bit that's not clear to me on this is, do these stay or are they only there when you do the search? My assumption is they're only there when you're doing the search, the white borders and the number, and that if you want to keep them there you have to pin them basically. You could always put a permanent tag on or something like that as well. If you didn't want a million pins, you could use the tagging system. I can't remember whether they've said if you can convert pins to tags. I can't remember if you can do that or not, but certainly it would be nice and pretty easy to just click on a pin and where you are just drop a tag on top, especially since you can move tags around. So yeah, really nice quality of life improvement, particularly as Clonan says, now that we're getting lots and lots of different, maybe that's a bit too much, but multiple new resources. We're going from 4 to what sounds like maybe 12 or something like that resources. And so a way to just find them quickly on the map is going to be really useful. Recipe crafting throughput tooltip. Try saying that 5 times fast. It's always been a bit of a debate as to how many tools we should give the player. When it comes to working out throughput and ratios, we preferred to leave more for the players to calculate. Personally, I quite like the process of looking at a recipe and then doing a bit of analysis to work out how I want to build things, considering what types of belts and modules I have on hand. In the base game this is fine, as the numbers are normally nice and round, but in Space Age it would become a mess accounting for machine quality affecting speed, module quality affecting speed and productivity, built-in productivity of specialised machines, technologies that increase recipe productivity, beacons with modules of differing qualities, and both beacon count and quality affecting transmission power. Not to mention we have a lot of new recipes which players will be unfamiliar with. These factors pushed us over the edge to finally add some information to the crafting machine tooltip to show what the machine will actually produce. So this is the new GUI in the game, and it's for an electromagnetic plant, this one here in particular, which is obviously crafting green circuits. You can see all of those, on the belts. And now basically we're getting a whole load of extra additions to the what appears in the in the tooltip, the GUI basically when you hover over. And in particular, the sort of big change to this is the 56.3 per second. So this is sort of saying that it's consuming 28.1 and 84.4 and producing 56.3 a second. So it's doing the full maths based on how much productivity bonus is going on, how much speed bonus, the state of the machine, what quality level it is. All of that maths is being done internally by the game. Obviously, it probably already was in order to produce these. But basically, we're being shown this via a GUI. Oh, and also, one of the things that is interesting here is because this is presumably, this is benefiting from a speed bonus. It's getting a reduction to its quality level. We already previously saw that, and they used the expression, speed makes waste, basically. So the faster the machine is sped up, the lower quality output it gets. This is just, it's interesting it gives this because the machine it's hovering over doesn't actually appear to have any quality modules in it. So I don't think that matters. I don't think they're doing quality with these ones, but they are doing quality because there is a bot over here. So I don't know if you can see that just on there. That is a accumulator that appears to be level 3, I think, quality. So quality is being used in this save is the point. And that's presumably why it's giving these quality stats, even though I don't think they're doing actual quality with this particular machine. But yeah, so it will also tell you about what the likelihood changes in quality for if you're doing that type of thing. But yeah, we're getting the numbers around productivity, how much pollution it's making, 50% of that presumably coming from the speed boosts it's getting because it's got quite a lot of beacons on it. Beacons, it's saying we've got 8 beacons on it. Obviously, a lot of these we already had with the health and the last user and that sort of thing, what's in the machine itself. We're also then getting the power demand. So we're getting the fully, worked through maths and like what it's breaking down to. In the min consumption, that's like, I presume that's like its idle power draw, and then that's obviously being summed into the max consumption, and it's telling us that it's 21.88 megawatts, which is interesting. I'm sure there's people busy crunching away spreadsheets to tell us how much power this is using and all sorts of stuff like that, because there's a very known recipe of green circuits, so I'm sure a lot of people are back calculating the maths to get at this. But yes, basically, I don't think this really changes like the design side of it, in the sense that, we know how much a green belt, which is what's being fed onto here, can hold. So if you're trying to fill a green belt and you're trying to do it with foundries, the question still remains of how many you have and put that together, how you build it, how you orientate the things. Are you doing like this where it's belts on either side and they're outputting? Are you stacking on belts? Those sorts of things. So it's still up to you to build something that will do those numbers. It's just that you'll be able to look at a machine and fiddle about with how it's doing it, basically, in a much more... It gives you the instant information. As you'll have seen a lot on my playthroughs, I like to use the calculators to do all this, and that's even in the base game where it is a lot simpler. And basically by using the rate calculator, I can see how much each machine is making, and is it filling the belt, and are they starving each other, all those sorts of questions. And so while it's not giving you quite that, there isn't quite the drag over and see all of the production, this is giving you away in the base game to see a lot of that information that's using. So if we know here that this requires 28.1 iron plates, then it's being fed by a foundry. It's getting them from a foundry, I believe. I think that one's doing iron plate. It might obviously be because one's doing iron plate and one's doing the cables, basically. So you would then be able to hover over that machine and say, right, well, this is producing 24.1 iron plate, so it's not producing enough, so I need to put another speed module in it, or I need to fiddle about with the recipe, or add another machine or something like that in order to fill the recipe. So it's giving you a little bit more information, but not completely solving the problem for you, like to some extent the calculators do. So yeah, so I really like this change. This is a really great quality of life improvement, and yeah, it will be great to have that in the game, and may stop me cheating with all of the rate calculators and stuff. Assembler recipe info. The look of the assembling machine GUI has been relatively untouched for a long time. With space age, new mechanics often mean new considerations, and the assembler GUI is no exception. The assembling machine product output slots show the recipe information as the tooltip. This is nice and has worked well, but we uncovered some issues. The recipe information means we can't show the actual item information. This deprived us of information as to how spoiled the item in the output slot is. Alt-clicking the output slot opens the Factoriopedia, but for the item, not for the recipe. With many new alternative recipes, this was annoying. We've then got two screen captures side by side showing both of those issues. I'm sure those are just examples and there are probably other bits and pieces that they had, but the left one, the caption says, "We can't see how spoiled the nutrients are." And what it's showing is a bioreactor, and it has, well, I'll come back to this. It has 50 nutrients from Jelly Yum as the recipe, and what it's showing us is, because it's hovering over the output, which is the nutrients, it's showing us what the ingredients for that was and what the products was. So it's, in other words, it's showing us the recipe. It's also showing us trash, which I assume is a new addition. That's like, that's the byproduct effectively, or the once it's spoiled product. I guess it's not a byproduct technically. But this is the spoilage, and that's there because it has a separate slot basically for spoilage. We've also then got the nutrients yummy value is 2 megajoules. Stack size 100. So that is talking about nutrients as an ingredient. And so yeah, that is talking about nutrients as the kind of product, the what's come out of that. That's what it's hovering over. But as it says, it doesn't show you the information on the spoilage. I mean, it does in a sense, in that you've got the white bar there showing the spoilage percentage, but it's not giving an actual percentage. It's not telling you what percentage spoiled they are. The right hand side of the caption then is, alt-clicking this slot will just open low density structures. And in this case, they've got a foundry and they're hovering over the actual output item. And alt-clicking, so holding alt and left click, is what takes you to Factoriopedia, and that literally will just take you to low density structures because that's what you're hovering over. And of course, in the foundry, the sort of point they're making is that, that's not the standard recipe. The plastic plus molten iron plus molten copper is not the standard recipe for low density structures. It's one of the alternate recipes. And so it won't take you to the alternate recipe, which is probably what you want to see. Or it might be what you want to see anyway. So we've split the recipe information from the slot, which makes things more straightforward. We then got the new GUI showing that. I have to confess, when I initially looked at this, I was like, I don't understand what the difference is. What they're actually talking about is that, you see, we've got the actual, the cogs here, and that's how you change the recipe. So that now is more of a separate thing, if you see what I mean. It literally says casting low density structure and has the icon for the appropriate recipe. Okay, so where that was kind of hidden before, we can't see what the recipe that's being used is other than by hovering over on that, and we can't then click on anything on here because as soon as you move your mouse, say you wanted to find out about the recipe from Factoriopedia, if you move your mouse to go over that, suddenly you're now not hovering over the low density structure, and so you can't click on it. So there's no way for you to go straight to Factoriopedia. You could, I guess, in theory, click on the cogs or something like that, but that would be a bit of a weird thing to do. And so instead now you've got a proper separate thing that tells you what it is, and as we'll see in a minute, what they're doing with that is they're then basically allowing you to hover over and see stuff and presumably click on it to go to Factoriopedia as well. So they're just providing you with a little bit more of extra information. And to say, I didn't spot that this was different. It took me ages sat there not seeing it. So yeah, but that's what's changed basically. This means that we can clearly separate where we are concerned with the recipe and where we are concerned with a specific item. The recipe icon or name shows the recipe tooltip. Clicking on it will open the Factoriopedia for that recipe. The product slot acts like every other inventory slot. The tooltip is for the specific item, and alt-clicking will open that item in Factoriopedia. We'll obviously go through the next examples, but looking at this example, the recipe item name shows the recipe tooltip, so if we hovered over that, we would get a tooltip for that recipe. And if we were to click on it, presumably just a normal click, not an alt click, that would take us to the recipe entry in the Factoriopedia. And for here, if we hover over the low density structure, it talks about the low density structure itself, the actual item, and alt clicking on it would take us to Factoriopedia for the low density structure. I'm assuming, and I think they did confirm, there are links between those, so you could then click through to the various recipe options, but I don't know, that, you know, it's just an easier way of getting at the information you want, basically. So then if we look at the two examples they've already given, the bioreactor and the foundry, we now see the improvements. On the left side, we've got recipe info shows recipe tooltip. So you see now we've got this nutrients from jelly is the recipe up here, and that was missing essentially from here. It wasn't missing, you'd have to, you know, to go on the item. But basically, yeah, where this was the, you know, the recipe part of it before, you now have to hover over that to get the recipe part of it. And if you hovered over the nutrients, you would get the information about the nutrients, which is what the next one shows. And so this right-hand side one, the caption just says product slot shows item tooltip. So again, if you hover over the item, the nutrients, you get the information. And that also allows them to put more information on, such as the freshness, the spoilage level of those particular items. This also helps show the name of the recipe if you're unfamiliar with it. As before, all you had to go on was the recipe icon. So yeah, so I guess basically the point there is, you know, if you've got all of this going on here, this would particularly be useful, I guess, for newer players, you know, who are not familiar with recipes, and also, you know, if you're joining a multiplayer, and it's going to be particularly useful, I would say, for like mods where they add on lots and lots of alternate recipes, you know, your Bobs and your Angels, but you're doing the same, you're getting the same products out of, you know, very different combinations of materials, and being able to see, right, well, I'm using this recipe. And just being able to see that straight off is going to be quite useful. But yeah, it's just more information to help you play the game just be a bit smoother. Particularly since, I mean, there's already quite a few recipes, you know, in basic Factorio. So the fact that we're expanding that tenfold maybe is going to make it difficult for anyone to remember. So this is one of the reasons I'm really keen on the Factoriopedia, because it's going to give us lots of access to information that previously we would kind of have to work out through, you know, looking at tech trees and items and all sorts of complicated stuff like that. So yeah, it's just another super duper quality of life thing, really. As always, search for some resources at the usual places. First point of speculation is around the recipes. They use two phrases in here that kind of, I don't know, a little bit reassuring. I've been a bit worried in the sense that, well, not been worried, but I wasn't really sure how many new recipes we were getting. Some of the planets were feeling, again, I don't know about simple, but there didn't seem to be too many things that we'd been told about, in a sense. You know, that how many intermediates are we getting? How many recipes are we getting? How many ways of crafting those things? And yeah, so we've got this expression here with many new alternate recipes. This was annoying. So many new alternate recipes to me says that we're getting multiple ways of making things, possibly used from different machines. So I don't think there's too much overlap between what the EMP can do and what the Foundry can do. And of course, the bioreactor just seemed to be focused on just Gleba stuff, you know, so just making plastic was probably about the closest it got for like overlap. But you know, we know we've got the recycler, but you know, those, I suppose those are technically alternate recipes, you know. So there was always this issue of, right, well, you know, how much overlap is there going to be? We know there is another manufacturing machine knocking about somewhere that we don't know anything about. You know, there's a third one that works very well in conjunction with the Foundry and EMP, we've been told, but we don't know what that is. You know, we don't know anything about that. So yeah, it's sort of nice to have that, you know, reassurance that there are many new alternate recipes. And of course, backing that up as well, we've got the fundamental mention of, not to mention we have a lot of new recipes which players will be unfamiliar with. So a lot of new recipes. So again, this isn't really a speculation point. You know, I always suspected we would get a lot of stuff to do, but you know, because they've been holding back and, you know, keeping the information kind of close to their chest, which, you know, is good. You know, I kind of want the surprise. I want the discovery of finding it all out. But it meant that we were, you know, not finding out a lot of stuff. You know, we still don't really know what any of the Gleba things are about, you know, and that's good. But it does then make me wonder, well, how many things are we going to make? You know, are we just making 3 new things per planet? Because that's not a lot. So it's nice to have that confirmation that there are going to be a lot of recipes and many alternate recipes, and therefore we will need Factoriopedia, all of these tools that they're giving us to manage that. Next one was a tiny little one. I don't know, we might well have seen this before, but we have the Spoilable icon here. This is like the information that something is spoilable. And it's a nice little thing because it's like the Factorio gear, you know, the O gear. And then it's got like this missing part here, which I assume is like the ticking down of the time. That's the time it's going to spoil. You know, that's the remaining portion. If you imagine it building the timer up, building the cog up as with like a clock going round, and then this is like sweat drop type things, sort of saying there's only a tiny amount of time left. That's quite a nice little icon to represent that, I think. Next one then was on the stack sizes. I don't know if maybe they've changed something or tweaked it, like how much a rocket can hold, but some of these stack sizes seem to be kind of larger than I was thinking. Now, we are seeing about things that you would expect to be small and lightweight. You know, we've got something called a low density structure, so low density means lightweight for its volume. But the stack sizes that can go in a rocket are quite large. So we've got a stack size of 50. Now that's a lot larger than the current stack size, I think. So yeah, so that's a lot larger than the current stack size. You know, the current stack size is only 10, which, you know, is a reflection, I think, of the fact that we're going to have to produce loads of these and have loads of them in order to launch all these rockets, because they are an ingredient in rocket, actual rockets, as well as being something you can put in a rocket. And so the stack size appears to have gone up to 50, which is a 5 times increase. It's only 10 at the moment. But also then there's 4 stacks. So in other words, 200, which of course in the old money, you know, if it was 10 sizes, that would have been 20 stacks. You know, that's half a chest of stuff that we're now being able to squish into a single rocket. And also then, to me, that seems to suggest that the effective weight of these has been reduced, and that this is a reflection maybe of balancing that they're doing, because 4 stack sizes and 200 low density structures, I say at the moment, that's half a chest. You know, that's half a cargo wagon of stuff that, you know, is being squished down into a single rocket. So that feels like maybe they're reducing some of the weight of some of the items so that you can send them about more easily, that maybe they were just finding there were too many rockets being sent around. Now again, these I would expect to be very small items. You know, they're very light items. They stack to 100 and they have a rocket capacity there of 2,020 stacks. So I would expect them to be light items. But one of the things that is interesting from that, though, is that it appears that rockets can hold kind of as many stacks as you want, given the item weight limitation. So in other words, there isn't going to be a parallel. The only restriction, I think, is probably going to be the weight. If you want to stick in something that weighs virtually nothing, then it will just let you put in, infinite stack sizes, basically. You're not limited by how many stacks a rocket can hold. We could be, of course, and that could be the limit. It could be that a rocket, its maximum quantity of stuff in terms of stacks is like the size of a train, basically, or something like that. But yeah, this feels to me like they're not going to limit how many you want to put in. That, I think, is more relevant for those rockets that you're sending small numbers of items just to build things with, and that the personal request rockets. So in other words, you could, if you wanted to put in one belt, one inserter, one and it was just a list of loads and loads of items, which eventually the weight got to a ton, then it would, it could be 50 stacks, and that's fine. If it's just one gear and one copper cable and things like that if you just need those one items, they're not going to say, right, well, you've got to stick it in 10 rockets, So yeah, so that was an interesting observation. Oh, and this one here, obviously, these jelly yums appear to be basically the same weight to the nutrients, so you get a capacity of 2,000 in them, which is 20 stacks. It really is one for short tiny little observations and speculations, I guess, because here we see with the nutrients one, we're now getting the spoilage time on some of these items. So this jelly yum is a 5-minute spoil time, which is very short. That is really very short. I could see quite a lot of that going off in your space platform, basically. 5 minutes, if you think about it, it's got to launch a rocket. And we know that takes like they've reduced it now, but that's like a 60-second animation time or something that it's now, or is it 50 seconds or something like that? It's shortened, but it's still quite a time for a launch. So you've got to get it into the rocket, fill that rocket with 20 stacks. You've got to put 20 stacks, if you want to fill the rocket, obviously. You've got to fill 20 stacks into the rocket. It's got to do its launch animation and off it goes. And then it's got to get to the platform. So how long is that going to take? That's like 2 minutes. So it's therefore then got 3 minutes to book it across the system. We don't know how travel time works between planets. So when it arrives, it's then got to send all the stuff down, and you've got to then distribute it around. 5 minutes to distribute 2,000 items around is not a lot. So that's half a train, So it makes me wonder how difficult that this just-in-time logistics are going to be. Obviously, I don't know that jellyums or whatever they are something you do actually want to send around. It could be just that maybe the science packs and a few other bits are something you want to do, the green science packs there. So yeah, maybe you don't necessarily want to send these around in rockets, and obviously it'll just tell you, just because it does, about the stack size in them. But yeah, 5 minute duration on those is very short. Here we've got the recipe itself only has a half-second craft time, so this is gear type speed craft times. We don't know what bonuses we get in the biochamber, I don't think. It's a very short craft time, so it's managed to thump those out. That's taken not very long at all, but it's already down to 84. You've already lost, over 15% of your freshness, out of that stack. And what's particularly interesting as well about that, look, so this recipe, 4 of these jellyums produce 50 nutrients. So this is only really 2 crafts. So the numbers, it looks like, are going to be a big part, is where I'm going with this, of the whole spoilage mechanic. It looks like these recipes may be really productive and produce a lot of stuff. And so the spoilage challenge kind of comes from the point that, you've got to put 2,000 items in a rocket. You've got to put 2,000 items on a train and do it as quickly as you possibly can. And you've got to have that train move as quick as it can and travel a shorter distance and things like that. So it sounds like the spoilage mechanic is more like a time pressure thing on whatever you build. One of the things that might counteract was, I've made this point before, that you can kind of defeat just-in-time logistics by just sending a lot. If you send 20,000 items and half of them spoil, you may not care. 10,000 items may be what you want. Or if they get half spoiled, so you send 20,000 but they half spoil, that's equivalent of sending 10,000. But if these things have such short spoilage time that actually any of them arriving unspoiled is a threat, then that really does force you down this route of, you must do just-in-time logistics. You've got to have fast platforms. You've got to be moving stuff quickly. Otherwise it spoils before you can do anything. It does also possibly hint, I would guess, at why maybe they didn't want to introduce a refrigeration mechanic. Because, obviously we don't know what the transit times are for between planets, so I can't really comment on that. But if you had a system where you're able to slow down the spoilage, then that makes loading 2,000 items into a rocket a lot simpler prospect. If you're able to slow if you've got 10 minutes to load them in rather than 5 minutes to load them in, that's a very different, prospect basically, because at 5 minutes you're getting into that territory of how many items and can you actually get in there with your current inserter speed and deliver via belt and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that might be a real balancing point that they've come to, that this forces you to really engage with the spoilage system. So the next one is a weird point in that they're using this jelly yum and yum phrase. I'm assuming this is a replacement, and that it's not actually called jelly yum and it's yum, because they are being consistent is the weird thing. If we go back to the Friday Facts 424, over here we had Yum Yum Yamako cannons, and I assume that this was a joke and what have you, and it may well be. I don't know. It's just, I don't know why they're hiding it if they're hiding it. Do you know what I mean? I don't know what it could tell us about what it's used for, what it's about, what it is, to give us the real name. So maybe these are the real names? They're just really bizarre. It doesn't, I'm going to be honest, it doesn't feel like it fits with the Factorio thing, if you see what I mean. It doesn't feel thematically consistent to have things called, although it's interesting we use jelly again, because I assume these were called jelly nut goodie huts, the other ones. This is the brain ones basically, and that this was, these are yum yums. It just feels silly, which I don't have any problem with silly, obviously, but it doesn't feel like it's... There's an element to Factorio's like manufacturing that is like a self-serious thing, you know? But it does have silly stuff sprinkled in, you know? You got slightly odd achievements and weird achievement names, and there are bits and pieces of just, you know, slightly ironic, we know this is all the game, you know, type of things going on. But to have that be like encapsulated, like it's part of an item name, feels like just the wrong side of that, if you see what I mean. And this isn't a complaint. If it's called that, fine. It's just, that's a very silly name, if you see what I mean. And like deliberately silly, you know, calling a silly thing Python style silly, not a hidden irony, if you see what I mean. It's very difficult to explain what I mean by this, but I say I'm assuming that this basically is a cover for something. The weird bit that I was going to point out in the speculation is that the yummy value is 2.0 megajoules. So that's an energy unit. So this is the type of thing, you know, if we look up coal. So if we look up coal, we see that it, and this is, so this is coal, sorry, off the top of the thing. But it has a fuel value of 4 megajoules because it is a burnable fuel. And now this has a yummy value of 2 megajoules. What does that mean? Doesn't mean, I say, it's weird to say, I mean, and we know you can burn spoilage, you know, you can stick spoilage in a furnace and burn it. I don't think we knew you could burn nutrients, and this is what it's, you know, this is a description of the nutrients. So what does that mean? And I say, particularly with it being jelly yum there, and then it being yummy value. Because the other thing it could be, of course, what it could be referring to obliquely and in a bit of a weird way, is obviously food has a caloric value, and it has and therefore has an energy value. But if you didn't know, just to sort of explain it, and this is just I don't know where that's come from, but just a quick Google search, basically. Calories, you know, when you talk about food calories, they're generally done in kilocalories, is what you're actually seeing when you see a calorie count, because a calorie is a tiny amount of energy. Basically, a calorie is... We have something called a bomb calorimeter, basically, and it's to do with, if you heat water, then that is like a standardized like way of counting energy as a calorie. And so if you burn food, you can basically measure the amount of energy, the amount of heat that is put into the water. So if you burn a bit of food, that heat will increase the temperature of the water, and you know how much energy it takes to increase the water by that amount of temperature. And so therefore you can then back calculate to say, right, well, this is the amount of energy that was in the food. And calorie was just like the standardized way of measuring that. I think literally 1 calorie is like raising, I haven't looked this up, but it's like raising 1 milliliter of water by like 1 degree centigrade, basically, or something along those lines. And so therefore it's like a very, very tiny amount of energy. A joule of energy is just almost like nothing. And as it says there, 1 calorie is 4.81 joules. So, you know, a calorie is a slightly bigger than a joule, but again, kilojoules, megajoules, those are the types of energies that are useful and meaningful amounts of energy, and so that's why you tend to have kilocalories. I've gone off on a weird tangent again, but the basic point I'm getting at is that food has an energy value. So is that effectively what they're measuring? Is that, you know, I don't know why they would be, you know, not calling it calories or something like that, but it just makes me wonder if there is going to be some other way of kind of... Because we know that nutrients are effectively the fuel for the biochamber, okay? And so are they just representing that simply with megajoules, you know? And so everything has a fuel value, but they seem to be distinguishing it by calling it the yummy value. Why wouldn't it just be food value or something like that, or, you know, bio value or something like that? It just seems a bit strange to use the term yummy. But then that would tend to make sense of some of this naming, in that the nutrients have a yummy value because they, again, I don't think they actually said it on the Friday Facts, it was kind of said on Reddit, I think, but the actual biochamber, this thing that's inside that's doing the wiggling, that's a wriggler. Okay, so this biochamber is a wriggler trapped inside like a glass case. Okay, and so when you're feeding your nutrients in, what you're doing is you are feeding a wriggler. Okay, so is that all tying into this food idea? Nutrients are food for the wriggler, and they have this energy value. And so when you're doing the maths on a lot of the biochamber recipes, you don't really need to think in terms of how much electricity they need. You need to think in terms of how much yummy food energy the thing needs to do the job. Okay, that would then slightly tie into, again, and I am slightly interpreting this. I think possibly these will have like proper names. I sort of hope they do. I don't mind the silliness, but it just seems a bit strange. And yeah, just given that we have terms like calories and stuff like that, why not just use them? But then you get basically the idea that these yum-yums, the ones which are the the orange fruit inside of the pink shell, that we first saw being harvested, those are the yum-yums, that they're basically used as fuel for anything else you want to do, and that the whole, whatever they're called, jelly nuts, or the goody nuts or whatever, the brains, basically, they're used for other things. So when we originally saw the production of the green agricultural pack, it was using these, these are the yum-yums in the, what they're called? Again, this is the problem with giving them silly names, in that it's very difficult to remember them. Jelly yums. Okay, so the jelly yums are what's being used, are these basically. So these green jelly surrounded mashes are the jellied yums. And so they're what's being fed in, along with nutrients, the fuel, to make the agricultural science packs. Okay, so if this involves the brains, the roasted brains somewhere, then we're not actually seeing how that happens, and perhaps maybe the jelly is produced from the brains. Brains famously are in a sort of, they're in like a jelly-like suspension in your head. So maybe that's what they're kind of humorously going for there. You get the jelly by squishing the brains or something and producing it that way. So I'm certainly I'm having a lot of problems, or I'm objecting to the silly naming, and I sort of am. I would prefer the silliness to be a little more subtle than calling something a yum-yum and a jelly nut. That's just, I don't know, there's a fine line somewhere, isn't there, where going from this is inherently silly, but we're not kind of going to acknowledge the silliness, you're just going to have to understand the silliness yourself, to we've just called this something stupid, isn't that silly? There's a little bit of a fine line there for me, and I kind of prefer when Factorio and a lot of games stay on the side of this is silly, but we're not going, the silliness is hidden under the surface and you can look for it if you want, versus, well, we've just called it jelly yums, I don't know, I sort of prefer that side, is the point. I don't mind, I don't care if it is called all this stupid stuff. I just sort of prefer if there's, it's like the hidden wink, as it were, to me is always more interesting than just the pie in the face, I think that's the difference. And say I don't actually care. It's just I would kind of prefer if we could get something that's a little more subtle. So this isn't really a point of speculation as such, I don't think. I guess it's like meta-speculation in a way, but I'm starting to wonder whether there's going to be a lot of stuff that we don't find out about. I kind of knew there always would be. As I mentioned, my sort of concerns over a lack of recipes and stuff like that is a reflection of that, in that, I kind of knew there would be lots of recipes. It's just that we weren't being told them, so I didn't know that there would be lots of recipes. And it's that same thing. I suspect, and I've always suspected, that there are both lots of stuff we're not being told about, but also that was deliberate. It's not that there isn't, that the expansion doesn't have a lot of stuff in it. I'm convinced it does. It's just that we're not going to find out a lot about it until after release. I think basically, because we are literally now 7 Friday Facts away, and you've got to think one of those has got to be the trailer. as the only one I think is pretty much guaranteed. But if you look at what we don't know anything at all basically about the final planet, which we think is Aquila. We don't know about the mechanics on that, which could be basically different to the actual endgame mechanics. We don't know anything about final research. We don't really know anything or a great deal about space platform logistics. We've had multiple hints at the very least about enemies on Vulcanus. We don't know what those are. Are there enemies on Fulgora? Are there enemies on Aquilo? I've literally just listed 8 things there, I think, or more than 8 things. And we've got only 7 Friday Facts left, So I can't see how we are getting information about all of that in the Friday Facts before release. Now, to me, that's a good thing. As I've said before, I kind of want lots of surprises. I want lots of things I don't know about, things I've got to work out, etc., etc. It is just interesting, though, which we will get. So I obviously have a little bit of a side problem in that I did, in my combat video, say that my next speculation video would be about enemies, and then we immediately found out about pentapods. I've been ridiculously busy at work, and now I'm about to go on holiday. So basically, I think I'm canning that video. I was expecting Vulcanus enemies in this Friday Facts, and obviously that's not what we've got. I would expect, either the next one or the one after will be that. So basically, it's probably going to be pointless for me to do an enemy speculation video because we're going to pretty much find out about most of the enemies. But it does leave lots of gaps that, I don't know what we will find out about before the Friday Facts, which makes it exciting, it makes it interesting. I do wonder how many Friday Facts we will get post-release as well, though. Will they tell us about these things, the mechanics of them, how they will work in a post-release Friday, in several post-release Friday Facts? You've got to think they've got to keep some hype going somewhere. As I've mentioned before, Space Age is very much an end game expansion. It's not expanding the beginning of the game. It's bringing things like rockets and stuff forward, so it's not as late as all that. But you've got to think you're probably doing like a 40-hour playthrough in order to get to the Space Age content. So when we all get it on the Monday, how far are most of us going to get? I know a lot of people will, have taken the time off and just play it continuously, but that's always going to be a smaller proportion of the fan base, and that most people are probably not going to get to anything Space Age until a couple of weeks in. So why bother spoiling everything for everybody when you could just talk about it, several weeks after release and just explain the design decisions and explain the designs and that sort of thing, assuming that most of your player base has encountered them organically. So this speculation is that we will not find out about a lot of stuff. And it's kind of over to you. What do you think we will actually get in the Friday Facts before release? Because I know a lot of people have been saying, well, I think we'll get this, and this in this order. And this proves that we're not getting that, I don't think. I think we might get maybe 2 or 3 really big ones. Maybe we will find out about Aquila and Vulcanus enemies, and that'll be it. And then the rest of them will be like smaller quality of life stuff. And as I say, the trailer and the making of the trailer and things like that. So yeah, as I say, let me know what you think we will find out about and what we won't find out about. I hope you enjoyed today's Friday Facts video and might consider coming back for another one. If you'd like to chat about the latest Factorio Friday Facts, you can find me live streaming Factorio every weekend over my Twitch channel at Trismegistus. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Assign some jobs. Yeah.